homes emerge here. Wow, so we forgot to record from the beginning, it sounds like. That's too bad. Anyhow, I did want to mention, you know, the inclusion of that travel demand model, we only did it a couple times because it was so tedious to run and difficult, which is strange to me. But even with just those 2 times across a 34-year period where Urban Sim's being run 34 times every year.
obsession이에요, 이거.
Okay, so we're muting all other participants. And hopefully I guess I'm not sure we have any time for questions. This session is going to go into something else, but I will stay here to take any questions in the chat box. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you so much, Kara. And yes, we don't have any time for questions, but we are ending right on time. It is 11 a.m. here, and I guess 1 p.m. where you are, Central Time. So thank you so much to everyone who was in this session and who presented. Please definitely feel free to write your questions to Kara if you have any in the chat box, and she will be able to respond. I actually don't know what the next session is in this particular Zoom room, but hopefully you all know what you're coming to. So thanks so much, and look forward to the rest of the conference.
Thank you, and I'll take over. I'm Raphael Stern. I'm going to be moderating the next session. While we get set up, if there are 1 or 2 questions for Kara, I think we could probably afford to do that. It was a great talk, and so I'd love to see a little bit of at least 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll move over to our next session, which is automated and connected transportation.
Yeah, hopefully Jason was answering some questions while I was focusing on the slides in there. He's a fantastic co-author who helped a lot with the Urban Sim questions. And Raphael, tell us about your background. I think you are an economist, am I right?
No, I'm actually I'm a civil engineer. So I come from sort of a, let's say, transportation and computation background. Sort of looking at new data sources, how we can leverage them to better manage transportation, better design and manage transportation systems. So a lot of that is, you know, automated vehicles, but I've recently gotten interested in a couple other problems, looking at, you know, data on where pedestrians walk and how we can maybe serve them better, data on where crashes happen with animals and how we can avoid those. So there's a broad range of problems in this leveraging data. Okay, well, I guess we'll move on. Have I been given screen share permission? It looks like I have.
Yes, you're the co-host now.
Great. And so let me welcome everyone to the next session. I hope you can see the right screen. Well, let me welcome everyone to the next session on automated and connected transportation. So we've got a total of 6 different talks, all sort of on this theme of connected automated transportation. What I'm really excited to see is a large emphasis here on sort of integrating the humans into a world with connected and automated transportation, both questions about how does this affect driver behavior, how does it affect people's travel choices, and then how do we design for this safely and integrate this into our standard design practices. I'm really excited about the session that we have today. The way we're going to do it is we have 15 minutes for talks and then hopefully 5 minutes for questions. So if you have a question throughout, please enter that into the chat box, and then we'll get to those sort of in order as we at the end of each talk. Is our first speaker, Sara Masoud, ready? If so, I'm going to stop sharing and let you share your screen, and I'll quickly introduce you.
Yes, I'm ready.
Wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing and let you share your screen, and then we'll get right to it.
Okay, do you have my screen?
Yeah, okay. So our first speaker is, we do see your screen. Our first speaker is Dr. Sara Masoud, who's an assistant professor of industrial and systems engineering at Wayne State University. She received her doctorate in systems and industrial engineering and master's in statistics from the University of Arizona. I think her research focuses on mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, dynamics, and data-driven application systems by utilizing applied machine learning, simulation optimization, in a whole bunch of different industries or areas, including transportation. So, Sara, go ahead. You have about 20 minutes or 15 minutes, and then I'll cut you off so that we have time for questions. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on from which country you are joining us. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. As kindly introduced, my name is Sara Masoud, And the work that I'm going to be presenting today is a collaboration with University of Michigan, Ruixuan Jiang, and Dr. Neda Masoud. And within this talk, I'm going to be answering this question: is the car following behavior of human drivers affected when following autonomous vehicles? Without any further ado, I'm going to start the presentation right now. So we all are somehow familiar with autonomous vehicles. The past few years have been witness to an increase in autonomous vehicles development and testing with many mobility-oriented companies, as well as original equipment manufacturers attempting to either open autonomous vehicle divisions or partner or acquire startups that focus on software or hardware development with a focus on autonomous vehicles. This is great, but as a quick introduction, autonomous vehicles are vehicles that use a lot of different types of sensors in order to sense the environment and gather data. These sensors can be anything from radar sensors, LiDAR sensors, cameras, or ultrasonic sensors. In terms of autonomous levels, we have 6 levels. The level 0 is where no automation is happening, and level 6 is full automation, where no driver is needed for driving the car. As a result, this move or these capabilities is going toward having a fully autonomous transportation system, which is going to have a lot of what's the question? Okay.
No, I don't think so. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Which is going to have a lot of benefits for us, such as increasing safety, smoother traffic flows, and which can lead to higher levels of fuel economy, less congestion, and curbing the environmental footprint in the transportation sector, which is great. But at the same time, there are some unanswered questions and limitations that are not, letting us to get there yet. For example, we need to learn more about the limitations that LiDAR and radar sensors are providing to us. We are not still not sure how fully automated cars would, perform in bad or worse weather conditions. We know that the performance of these cars are sometimes questionable when we are working through highly congested areas, and also the diversity within traffic laws and regulations within even United States, within different states, is causing this movement to a little bit slow down. Now, one thing that can help us to better be prepared for getting there actually is to understand or study the car following behavior of drivers. Car following behavior of studying the car following behavior is of interest for transportation researchers because, as I mentioned before, it can help us to have better flow throughput control. We can have higher on-road safety and improved energy consumptions. But when we are talking about car following behavior or its analytics, it can be categorized into two main groups. The first one studies the stability, which can be a string stability or plant stability of the traffic flow. And the second category quantifies the car following behavior using a statistical methods. It can be as simple as mean and variance analysis. Now, in this talk, we are going to be focusing on the second group, where we are going to be using a statistical tools to quantify car following behaviors. Now, if you look at the literature, there are a lot of works already done. For example, we have Liu's team, which showed that the different speed limits have a significant influence on the time headway. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that in the literature, a lot of time headway is the factor used to model or mimic the car following behavior of the drivers. In another work, we have Jill Cream that showed that the intersection between area type, number of lanes, and vehicle type can significantly influence the car following behavior. And we have other works that is showing us the type of the car, or for example, road condition can be impacting significantly the car following behavior of the drivers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in this work, we are going to be focusing on this question: is the car following behavior of human drivers affected when following autonomous vehicles? To answer that, we first need to mention that within this work, we use time headway in order to model the car following behavior of the drivers. And we define time headway as the time it takes for the following vehicle to reach its leading vehicle. Now, here is the framework that we propose in order to answer this question, and it has two main phases. The first phase focuses on data acquisition, where the second phase focuses on analytics. In the first phase, we are going to be using naturalistic driving data from LEAF level 5 and next generation simulation databases in order to extract time headways and determine whether the following driver is aware of the fact that it's following an autonomous vehicle. To do so, let me start by introducing these two data sets, and then we can move forward from there. So the LEAF level 5 data set was originally defined as a prediction data set in order to help to better model autonomous algorithms for autonomous vehicles. It contains raw camera, LiDAR, and radar data. It is collected from a fleet of 23 autonomous vehicles. It fixed high demand roads in California. And data such as vehicle position based on global coordinate system, velocity, and a unique ID for each agent is available to be extracted from the data set. The next generation simulation data set includes detailed vehicle trajectory data in 4 sites in California and Georgia, contains vehicle ID, global coordinates of the vehicles, vehicle type, vehicle acceleration, space headway, and time headway for the vehicles. And from these two data sets, we extracted the time headway series of each legacy vehicles, whether the legacy vehicle was following another legacy vehicle or regular vehicle, or it was following an autonomous vehicle. Now, after extracting the time headways, it was important for us to understand whether the legacy following an autonomous vehicle is aware that it's following an autonomous vehicle. And to address that, we conducted change point analysis on the time headway of the following driver to identify the moment in time when the human driver has identified the leading autonomous vehicle. Now, the scenario that we were considering is the observed change point were used to filter out non-responsive drivers. If change point analysis was excluded from the study, we could analyze the time headway data with some alternative assumptions, but we prefer to use time headway, and I'm going to give you some illustrative examples to see why we made this choice. So for example, given a car following pair, if there was no change point detected from the autonomous vehicle, then if we have extracted any change point or detect any change point from the time headway of the following legacy, we would have understand that the driver of the legacy vehicle is reacting to something that is not seen on the road technically, because if there was something within the environment, the autonomous vehicle would have made some reaction as well. So as a result, we made this assumption that if there is a point of time that and when the legacy is getting close to the AV and its time headway behavior is making a change that we cannot explain because of the environment and the surrounding area, then that's the moment that the legacy is understanding that it's following an AV or autonomous vehicle. Now, at this point, we have the data. We have identified the moment that the legacy driver is aware that he or she is following an autonomous vehicle, and from this point, we are going to be studying the behavior of the legacy driver to see whether its following behavior is different from when following another legacy vehicle. To do the analytics that we want to perform, the first problem that we observed was the fact that we were working with time series type of data. And as you may know, autocorrelation is a problem whenever we are dealing with time series. And as a result, we conducted partial autocorrelation and lag differencing in order to stationize the data. We also conducted some balancing by using random sampling without replacement, just to make sure that our dataset is balanced enough in order to maximize the power of the test that we were running. After that, we have a well-defined data set. We fed a statistical model, which was a nested factorial model, and followed it by some pairwise comparison and adequacy check to make sure that the statistical model will make sense. In terms of autocorrelation analysis, I'm going to be just showing some results over here. I'm not going to spend much time here, but as you can see, on the original data that we sampled, there are some autocorrelation lags that are happening. And after performing first order differencing, you can see that these lags are removed. This autocorrelation is addressed. And this is the statistical model that we fitted. So over here, we can see that Yij is technically the time headway measurements that we had. Mu is the overall mean, and alpha, beta, gamma, lambda, and theta are capturing the effect of time period, platoon structure, data source, row type, and lane, respectively. So because we were working with naturalistic data and we have some additional information available, we included those factors, hoping that it can help the model to explain some of the variation that we are observing within the data. And this is the structure of the data that we were working with, and that's why we fit an nested model, because some of the features are dependent on other features. So for example, if we are working with legacy following autonomous, we have the row type is only limited to urban areas. And as a result, that's why we are working with nested structures. In addition to the model, we also added some constraints, and that's because the nested factorial model, which we originally shown, is not identifiable, and using these additional constraints help us to narrow down the solution space to a unique set of fitted parameters. Now, moving forward, again, we also check the adequacy of the model. Here, we are just showing visual confirmation that the model is following these assumptions, and the main assumptions here are on the epsilon, which is modeling the error within our model, which we believe or we assume that it's going to be following a normal distribution with mean 0 and fixed variance. And looking at the QQ plot and then the residuals plot, we can visually confirm that these assumptions are true. We also ran a setup test, and the test also confirmed that these assumptions hold true. These are the results of our fitted nested fixed model. We can see that among all the different factors that we included in our model, platoon structure is the only factor that is significantly different. And following up some pairwise comparison, we can see that no matter whether we are changing the lane or changing the time period, what is actually seems to be significant here is when the platoon structure is different, which means that whether legacy is following the legacy or legacy is following an autonomous vehicle. So in conclusion, in this study, we propose a nested factorial model to study the potential effects of autonomous vehicles on human drivers' carpooling behavior using naturalistic driving data sets such as NGSIM and LIFT level 5. We considered many different factors such as platoon structure, time period, traveling lane, and road type. And based on the result that we observed, it shows that in a real world setting, a human driver's carpooling behavior when following a legacy vehicle is different from when it's following an autonomous vehicle. That was the answer that we were trying, or that was the question that we were trying to answer. I can conclude my presentation here. I think I'm a little bit over time, but if you have any questions or which you are interested, you can send us to these two emails, saramasoud@vain.edu or nmasoud@umit.edu. And by that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. Wonderful. I appreciate it. That was really interesting. This is the question that I've sort of thought about, is sort of, how is that going to change? How is the human part going to change, not the autonomous vehicle part going to change? So this was really nice to see that somebody's trying to address that. If anyone has questions, we do have a few minutes still until the next talk starts. So if you have questions, please enter them into the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask a question that I was kind of thinking of. So to my understanding, you looked at 2 different data sets. And then you looked at, really the only difference we're looking at was the headway, or the time headway. And I'm wondering if there's obviously it would be difficult to measure with this data set, but if you could see something like how the level of trust in the automated vehicle. So if you're a human driver driving behind an automated vehicle, how your level of trust in the vehicle would manifest itself in your driving. And I'm wondering almost if, headway is one measure, but if something like reaction time, sort of like if you're following a driver that you do not trust, you might be much faster to react, or just conjecture here. I'm wondering if you could basically apply the same method to look at other things like reaction time, or how frequently, like passing rate, like do you frequently try to get away, distance yourself from automated vehicles, things like that. I'm wondering if you thought about any other factors to look at.
That's a very good question. So to be honest, what really limited us in this study was that we want to use naturalistic data. We didn't have control experiment or experimental data. And as a result, it really limited us what are the factors that we can use in order to model the car following behavior. So time headway, it was something that we could define, but something like a reaction time, it's not really measurable, or that's not something that we can extract from the data. Lane changing is something that we can, I think, extract, but again, it goes down to the fact that how we can prove whether the legacy is aware that it's AV or not. And it all go back, in this study, we applied chain point analysis, and all the study is based on the assumption that the change point that we are at the time point that we are detecting is true, and that's the only way that we could have done it. We can go ahead and design experiments where we can collect data in a more controlled environment, but I think that's it's going to cause another discussion, saying that how much your data is really true, given that the drivers now are aware that, you know, it's a controlled environment. They know they are going to be measured, the reaction and everything. And as a result, we may end up losing some accuracy over there, but I think it is worth it to just give it a try and see how, for example, the trust can be modeled and how it can be factored in, you know, analytics like this.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, and maybe Tanjeeb, if you want to go ahead and start sharing your slide. There's one question that came in the audience as well that I think would be interesting to maybe very quickly answer. So the question is, beyond saying that the behavior is different, can you characterize how it's different? If you can quickly address that, and then maybe have a longer conversation offline.
So we did some follow-up comparisons to see exactly how we can quantify that difference. I don't have the numbers exactly at the top of my mind, but I think within the paper that, again, just reach out to us. I'm going to be happy to share the paper with you. Within the paper, we are doing some follow-up analytics to show that whether the time headway is smaller, larger, and what is the percentage of those differences and numbers.
Yeah, great. Well, maybe that sounds like a longer conversation could be held offline. Thanks again, Sara. Really appreciate it. Please join me in thanking Sara. And then we'll give the floor over to Tanjeeb Ahmed. So our next speaker is Tanjeeb Ahmed. He's a PhD candidate in the Transportation Science program at the University of California, Irvine. He completed his master's degree in Transportation Science and Urban Planning. And his current research is oriented towards modeling and analysis of complex activity travel behavior in the context of traditional and emerging technologies. So I think that's a perfect fit for our session today. Tanjeeb, you've got about 15 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stern, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. So our study analyzes the equity implications of shared automated vehicle-enabled mobility services, or SAMs, in terms of employment accessibility. So I'll start with the major findings first. The results show that young Hispanic workers in low-income households with multiple vehicles would benefit more from SAMs than other socioeconomic groups. The study also uncovers the existence of the ecological fallacy when the synthetic population of workers are aggregated spatially into census tracts. The census tract level distribution showed lower benefits for the young age group and persons from low-income census tracts, while individual level distributions show higher level of benefits apportioned to these groups. The transportation system is critical in accessing basic services such as healthcare, education, affordable housing, employment, and food. In particular, equitable or inequitable access to mobility can directly impact job accessibility. Emerging mobility options like SAMs can significantly improve the mobility and job accessibility, which necessitates the appropriate quantification of benefits and cost as well as their equity impacts. The equity analysis that are performed traditionally often use high spatial aggregation that fails to capture the discernible differences across various socioeconomic groups, which ultimately leads to a phenomenon known as the ecological fallacy. The goal of this study is to investigate this ecological fallacy by examining the distributional accessibility benefits of SAMs in the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG region. And to fulfill this goal, the first objective is to measure job accessibility benefits from SAMs using the destination mode choice model developed by Ahmed et al. And the second objective is to compare the individual level benefits with the area level benefits across various socio-demographic characteristics of SCAG workers. The method for calculating the accessibility benefits of SAMs relied on several assumptions. First, the inclusion of SAMs in the transportation system is conceived as a SAMs only mode and SAMs plus transit mode, where the SAMs mode will act as an access mode. Second, it is assumed that the introduction of SAMs will impact mode choice and subsequent destination choice of workers. Third, the study considers the existing residential and workplace locations and road network travel times will prevail when SAMs operates. The fourth assumption states that SAMs will have a lower cost than ride sourcing services and personal vehicles, and there is no associated parking costs. The fifth assumption is that the in-vehicle travel time of SAMs will be similar to personal vehicle, but the wait times will vary between 3 to 10 minutes, depending on the population density. So if a person lives in a high density area, he or she will experience low wait times and vice versa. This slide represents the conceptual framework of this study, which is adopted from Ahmed et al. It shows the employment accessibility benefits of employment accessibility calculation for a representative worker. For this worker, the socio-demographic variables are used as a proxy for willingness and ability to do specific jobs. Under the land use transportation system 1, which is portrayed as the existing condition, the future condition that we perceive is in the land use transportation system 2 at the bottom. So for the land use transport system 1, for this worker, the socio-demographic variables are used as a proxy for his willingness and ability to do jobs. So this person has a set of workplace destination under land use transportation system 1 and 3 mode options for each destination based on the socio-demographic attributes and home location. The land use transportation system 2 represents a future scenario where the SAMs only and SAMs plus transit modes are included with the existing 3 transport modes, which are walk, drive alone, and transit. The 2 employment accessibility arrows denote the extent to which the land use and transportation system enables the representative worker to reach employment opportunities he or she individually values by means of the available transport modes. The last box denotes the difference between the representative worker's current employment accessibility level and their accessibility level in the future with the 2 SAMs commute modes. This study uses a log sum-based indicator of employment accessibility based on a hierarchical destination mode choice model that includes a number of socio-demographic mode and location variables from the 2012 CHTS dataset. For equity analysis, we applied this framework within the dotted line to calculate the change in accessibility benefit due to SAMs modes for a 5% synthetic population of the SCAG region. In addition to calculating the accessibility benefit at the individual level, we also calculate the benefits at the census tract level by taking the sum of all individual benefits from the different socioeconomic groups residing in each tract. To understand the spatial distribution of the accessibility improvements from the true SAMs modes, the annual accessibility benefit per capita for each census tract is displayed for the whole SCAG region in this map. Note that the accessibility benefit is displayed as an annual value corresponding to a 5% synthetic population of the SCAG region. A higher benefit is portrayed with a color towards red, while a color towards yellow represents a lower benefit. We can see that the peripheral census tracts receive the most benefit where the population density is the lowest. We will now compare the distribution of the accessibility benefits between census tract level and personal level for various socioeconomic characteristics. In each box plot that we show here and in the subsequent slides. The x-axis represent the annual accessibility benefits per capita, and the y-axis represent the subcategories of the socio-demographic characteristics. The ages of the box are constructed with 25th and 75th percentiles of the accessibility benefit, and the whiskers represent the 2 standard deviations from the mean in both directions. We can also see the mean and median within each box represented by a solid vertical line and X respectively. The box plots are supplemented by an ANOVA and a post-hoc Jiaqi HSD test. The ANOVA resulted in significant differences in all of the tests, whereas the Jiaqi HSD test resulted in significant difference in most pairwise comparisons. The tract level distribution we see here on our left indicates a greater benefit in high income census tracts compared to low income census tracts due to the introduction of SAMs. However, the person level distribution on the right indicates that low income group has the highest benefit. In this slide, we make the same comparison, but for household car ownership. Both tract and person level distribution shows that persons with more cars in the household have a higher median and mean accessibility benefit compared to other groups. While this is a counterintuitive finding, it does indicate that carless households still experience a large magnitude of benefit that is very close to other groups. Since car ownership is also associated with transit accessibility, we further investigated these distributions considering transit service level in the home locations of the commuters. So this set of slides shows these distributions where we use both car ownership and transit accessibility to compare the distributions between tract level and person level benefits. So in this box plot, the transit service level is represented by the number of jobs accessible by a 45-minute minute travel time of transit. The zero car and low transit access category at the tract level on our left has only one data point for which it was not possible to generate a box plot. So why that category is empty. As expected, we see that in all groups of household car ownership and accessibility benefits from SAMs are higher when transit level service is low and vice versa. Although the tract level distributions are similar before and after adding the transit accessibility, the person level distributions are significantly different. In the person level distribution, we see that households with no vehicle and who live in areas with low transit service has the highest benefit. We also use the transit job accessibility matrix to explain the variance in the distributions of household income. These charts show that the low and high income groups have similar levels of accessibility benefits in census tracts with low transit service. But considering the difference in the accessibility benefit between these groups at the high transit service level, the low income group tends to have a lower sensitivity to transit service than high income group. The ecological fallacy in this aggregate level analysis is confirmed when we look at the person level distribution that shows low income group experiencing the highest accessibility benefit in both levels of transit service. And for age, we see that the person level distribution from the person level distribution that the 16 to 25 years age group experiences at least 30% more benefits than other age groups. The tract level distribution clearly understates the benefits of this young age group. The tract level distribution of benefits across different ethnic and racial groups conforms to the individual level distribution, as both indicate a higher level of benefits for the Hispanic population. So in conclusion, we can say that the results indicate the presence of an ecological fallacy, as the tract level analysis suggests high income tracts benefit more than low income tracts, whereas the individual level analysis suggests low income workers benefit more than high income workers with the introduction of SAMs. Hence, If we base policy decisions on a spatially aggregate measure for a spatially ubiquitous mobility technology like SAMS, it can lead the policymakers astray. So in equity analysis, agent-based transportation system models with synthetic population generators offer several advantages. It avoids choosing spatial aggregation, as the analyst can work at the most disaggregate level. Also, the agent-based model can inform people-based policies through people-based analysis, as opposed to place-based policies through place-based analysis. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Tanjeeb. Thank you very much. So if you have questions, again, please feel free to enter them into the chat box. We have a couple of minutes now. I was going to start with, I have a couple of questions. I was wondering, the results that you have, how specific, I mean, so it's clear that the specific results that you have are quite specific to the Southern California area, but I'm wondering how much of this you can translate without having to do without having to rerun the entire study for a different area. How much of this can you translate to other parts of the country? How much of it is translatable, and how much of it do you think is really is specific to the census tracts in the areas that you used in the study?
So basically, we used a synthetic population for the whole SCAG region. And for the sample, we used the CHTS 2012 data set, along with other data set for which the model was originally built by the study I was referring to, Ahmed et al. So considering the specific characteristics that we have in the SCAG region and the socio-demographic and the population characteristics are exactly vary a lot, considering we have the LA County here and also very low density areas. So I think it can be translatable to other areas, considering we have all the required data that we used for this study.
I can add something quickly. I think Tanjeeb mostly hit it. So method-wise, yeah, it transfers relatively easily. The question is the data available? A lot of MPOs are willing to share their model parameters and their synthetic populations. In that case, you just need a pretty big size computer to run that synthetic population through the destination mode choice models and do your output analysis. Now, do these results transfer? I think mostly in metropolitan areas they do. So a couple of things are going on here, right? The spatial issue arises because low-income people and ethnic racial minorities tend to live in highly accessible places that is close to urban cores compared to higher income people who live in suburban areas. But low-income people and ethnic racial minority groups or individuals tend to benefit more from mobility improvements such as SAMs. So you have these two competing factors that are fighting against each other. And I think those competing factors are going to be consistent across the New Yorks, the Chicagos, et cetera, as well as LA. But maybe in medium-sized cities, you might even see a bigger benefit because the low-income people are also living out in the areas that don't have much job accessibility.
Yeah, thanks to both of you. I'm kind of on that. I'm wondering, a trend that I think has been slowly starting and isn't really at the point where it's maybe a trend yet, but is that oftentimes that as the cores become more popular again and again, or that what was happening at least for a while, then sort of lower income people get moved out to like maybe first ring suburbs or even further out. And I'm wondering if so if I'm understanding correctly, that would then actually increase the benefit of SAMs because then you kind of have, instead of these two factors fighting against each or counteracting each other, you'd have them both working sort of in the same in together in unison. Exactly. Or something. Is that a
more synergistic? Yeah, exactly.
There we go. That's the word. That's the word. I had another question, if possible, and I wanted you to and maybe we just kind of hit on it just now, but you mentioned this this sort of interesting result that households with more cars have greater benefit. And I might have just missed it, but I'm wondering if you can you give us some insight as to like what's going on there or why that, because I agree that seems counterintuitive, but there might be a really easy explanation for why that is.
So for that, we're also actually surprised like why that is happening. So we looked into the data set a bit more and we saw evidence of voluntary carlessness across the data set. And actually we find that 18% of the upper middle income group and 4% of high income group households who do not own a car, they live in high density areas. And sorry, only 20% of them live in high density areas. So we have some portions of people in the high income group who are voluntary carless. And some of them live in high density areas. So, which is making them like more beneficial in terms of SAM's benefits, introduction of SAMs.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So it's basically, it's a function of the population that you have and who's choosing. You have a large number of people who choose not to have a car or choose to have few cars, and that's kind of that's changing the result from what you might expect. Tanjeeb and Mike both, thank you very much. This is really interesting. So thank you very much. If there's more questions, I see that the one just came in chat or a comment came in chat. I would suggest that we continue those offline to stay on schedule. Our next speaker is Yueshuai He. Dr. He, are you available? Are you ready? Go ahead and maybe Tanjeeb, if you stop sharing the screen, and then Dr. He can share his screen.
Yes,
perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. So Dr. He is a project scientist at the Mobility Lab in the Department of Civil Environmental Engineering at the University of California, Los Angeles. He received his PhD in Transportation Planning and Engineering from New York University and his MS and BS from Beihang University in China. Dr. He has broad research interests in transportation systems analysis, big data analytics, travel behavior analysis, and transportation planning. And he's going to be talking about some of this transportation planning and behavior through data analysis. So Dr. He, go ahead, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Yueshuai. The topic of my presentation today is connected and automated vehicle impacts analysis in Southern California. Oh, can you see my screen right now?
Yeah, we see your screen.
Okay, great. So the topic of my presentation today is connected automated vehicle impacts in Southern California. Actually, it's a consecutive study. Like my presentation is more about like the travel behavior and demand analysis. And our team member Qinhua will give another presentation, which is the second part of this study. We talk about like the system impacts, like VMT emission and also equity, also from this project. So first, I will talk about the background. So connected and automated vehicles right now is a very hot topic. And we know like a lot of like private companies, they start to test the vehicles on road. And also from the public agency side, both the federal government and also some state agencies, they propose a lot of like policies to accommodate or regulate the CEVs on road. So like people in academia, in the literature, we have a lot of studies about like how this CEV, the future technology, will impact the current system. Like our concentration in this study is about like the impact on the travel demand side. So we take a look at the ABM study, which is activity-based model. And there are some studies like they concentrate on like they adopt activity-based model to predict how the CEV will impact the transportation system. Some studies they conducted in Seattle, Chicago, and Columbus. And there are some research gaps regarding this existing studies. Like some of the studies, they lack of like the CEV related data. Actually, they don't know how people, they don't do surveys. They don't know how people will interact with the new service, new like CEV technology. And also to address that, they just give some like simple assumption, like we change the value of time people and also some like waiting time. They change some model parameters to trying to incorporate the new features of CEV. So that another gap is that like if you only change some parameters, you cannot go to very deep, like fundamental behavior changes of people. You cannot capture those changes. So that our problem, like in this study, is like we trying to like first we design a survey to collect it how people will actually like interact with CV with this new technology, how they like will change their travel behavior, and then we will incorporate every like the survey data into like our existing activity-based model to like predict the new travel demand with the new technology. So this study is funded by the California Statewide Transportation Research Program, and the contributions of this study, as I mentioned, like there's two contributions. First, we designed a survey and distributed in Southern California, and we collected people like first their intent to use CV. Not everyone would like to use it. And also for all the CV users, we asked about like if CVs are widely available, you have CV right now, then what kind of like behavior change you will make to your current like travel behaviors. And second, with our survey data, we know like who are the CV users and then how they will like change their travel behaviors. Then we will incorporate every like behavior change in our like this existing activity-based model framework. We will capture people's travel behavior from long-term to short-term. So I will go to like general methodology. We will have a synthetic population for the whole Southern California and to represent the people's like social economic information. And based on our survey, we will know like which household is the CV user. Then we will split our synthetic population to CV users and non-CV users. For CV users, we will use our like CV incorporate ABM to predict their travel behavior. And for those like who is non-CV user, we will just use the original model to predict their travel behavior and also associated travel demand. And then now we have like a new travel demand. We will simulate the travel demand in like a realistic road and transit networks. And this is the concentration of our second study. So Qinhua will give a more detailed discussion here. So for the behavior change, as I mentioned, we talk about like the behavior change from long-term like work-related choices to mid-term like activity-related choices and short-term mode choice. So before I go to more details about like the methodology, I want to give a short introduction about activity-based model, which is the advanced travel demand forecast model. The basic principle of activity-based model is that like people's travel demand is generated from like the demand for activities. People travel for their activities. And the activity-based model, the EBM, it can like provide the daily trip chains and also activity schedules at individual level, which is like different from like the OD matrix from the 4-step trip-based model. So our study is based on the SCAC ABM, which is the Southern California Association of Government. They developed a like really large scale, which is one of the largest ABM in the world. And here is the system design of the activity-based model of SCAC. We have synthetic population, we do long-term, mid-term, and short-term choice. And then we also have the trip assignments. Based on the existing ABM framework, actually we adjust a lot of like models, some models in the ABM framework, which we circled with red box. And we adjust these models with our data to incorporate like the new travel behaviors of CV users. So I will go into details about how we update those models in a minute. And another part is about data collection. Like as I mentioned, like we design a stated preference survey and distribute online to collect like people's intent to use CVs. Like if CVs are widely available based on your knowledge about CV, whether or not you will use CV for your daily travel. And then the second stage for the CV users, we will ask like more questions, like considering your current travel patterns, your activity purpose, your travel modes, your travel time, something like that. We will ask like if you have CV, then what kind of change you will make. So that's a second stage only for like CV users. And also to make sure our survey data is like representative enough, we control several like household level and personal level attributes to make sure like our survey data doesn't have like very large bias. So I will talk about the research findings first. For the survey, the results show that like about 54% of people would like to use CV in their daily life. The number is not very large actually for now, because people have concern about like the safety of the CEV, and also some people that even don't trust this new technology. And also our survey findings is consistent with the survey like conducted in 2017 from the California vehicle survey. We have a result about like 52%, which means like currently only half of people would like to use CEV. And if we want to promote this new technology, we need to like educate more about this, the technology to persuade people, more people to adopt it. Another interesting finding here is like with CEV available for CEV users, actually they would like, they are willing to like accept a longer travel time, because like if you have CEV, you no longer need to like drive anymore. There's no driving pressure. You have like higher productivity during the trip. You can do whatever you want, so that people can actually accept a longer travel time. So our survey shows that about like 40%, 41% of people can accept like 20 minutes longer than their current travel. And then let's talk about the model. First, I want to talk about is a long-term choice, which is about the work arrangement. The work arrangement here is a like combination of some like work-related attributes. First is work duration, like short-term work, less than 20 hours per week, medium 20 to 40 hours per week, and long is 40 and more hours per week. And then second attribute is about like a workplace. We have fixed workplace, home workplace, and variable workplace, and number of jobs is one and multiple. So our model, the prediction of our model is like a combination of these three attributes to represent people's work arrangement patterns, and we have a distribution of the work attributes. So we can find out like the dominant pattern of the work arrangement is the 13, which is long, 40 hours per week, fixed work location, and one job, which means like this is a general pattern of the population. And we found that when CVs are available, actually those numbers decreased from 60% to 45%, which means like when CVs are available, people can accept more flexible work patterns. And as a survey data indicates, like people can accept longer travel time for work. So that we incorporate this results into our model, and we found that this is a distribution of CV users and original like non-CV users. We found that for the short distance work trip, the number of CV users decreased, and there's a large increase here. Like with CV available, actually CV users can accept a longer travel distance, even though like they are larger than 40%. So by incorporating the behavior change right from our data, we found that average work home distance changed from like 18 miles to 22 miles. And medium-term choice, activity frequency. First, I want to talk about like, the work frequency. We find that this is a distribution of the work activity frequency. So we find out this is a distribution of the number here is different combinations of work activity. So work means general work. B means like business activity, like people go for some business meeting, something like that. So we found that the dominant pattern, which is like single work, decreased a lot from 80% to like nearly 50%, which is consistent with our like work arrangement prediction. People can now accept more flexible work activities, and they get rid of like the old single work. They try to get more work and more business trips. And we found out the work trip increased from like 20 million to 23 million. Another finding is about other activity types, which is like non-monetary activity. We have maintenance activity like shopping, household shopping, something like that. And also we also have another like discretionary activity types. And since work activities takes most of the time window during one day, so there's not enough times for people to adjust their behavior. So we find that actually the change of this non-monetary activities is not very significant. But even though like they still have increased a little bit for people. Like for maintenance activity, it increased from 15 million to 60 million, nearly 17 million. For the discretionary trace, also increased from 18 million to 20 million. And last finding is about the mode choice. So if there's currently like we have like SOV, which is single occupied vehicle, HOV means high occupied vehicle, And we have taxi, transit, and walk and bike school bus as like a general mode choice for people. And we have a distribution from SCAC ABM, which is current status. And for our model, for CV users, we have two new options, which is personal vehicle and shared vehicle, shared CV. So that we predict people's mode choice, new mode choice, which shows as a red, the yellow color, and the blue color is the original SCAC ABM. We found that like about 14% of people will shift to use CV, either personal owned or shared vehicle for their daily travel. And here's some conclusion about our like research findings. In terms of trip purpose, the work trips, when CVs are available, people would like adopt more flexible work arrangement. They will seeking more work opportunities. They will have more work trips. So for work trip only, when CVs are available, people will travel about like 50% more. For other two, like non-managed activities, household maintenance and discretionary, even though the time is limited, like work takes a lot of time during one day, but the CVs, they make travel easier, so that those kind of trips also increased. Like household maintenance, it increased by like 11%, discretionary increased by like 13%. And another indicator is about like the kind of like VMT, because currently we only do the demand side analysis. We don't do the traffic assignment. We don't know how people will travel actually in the network. So we can only determine like the distance of people travel by Euclidean distance, but at least it can provide us some like a trend of how the travel will be. So here we calculate the car-like modes, which is like SOV, HOV, taxi, school bus, and also CVs. We found that for this kind of modes, the car-like mode travel distance increased by like about 19%, which means if you like adopt a CV in the whole system and people will adapt their travel behaviors, then the total VMT of the system will increase a lot, significantly. Like here, about like 20%. And our like a second part study will give an exact number of how the VMT will change and associate traffic emissions. And last finding is about like travel distance, trip distance. Like with CV available, we find that in the previous slides, we showed that like the travel work distance, the distance of work trip increased a lot from like 18 miles to 22 miles. But here the increase is very little, which means like actually people preferred for these other two purposes, the household maintenance and discretionary, people select more short distance trips, which makes like the increase of trip distance increase very small. So to conclude our study, like first finding, according to our survey, only half of people would like to adopt CV in Southern California. And we also incorporate some like behavior change of CV users. So we find like the work arrangement is more flexible, longer home work distance is acceptable, and more business and non-mandatory trips are expected, and SOV trips are more likely to shift to CV. And the last one is about like what I talk about, the indicator of VMT. There will be like about 19% increase in the total travel distance. And this is acknowledgement with thanks our like a funding source, and also we collaborate with the SCAC. Thanks for them to share the model with us. So that's all about my study, and those two papers are published. So I will tap over the topics of these two papers in the chat box. So feel free to explore, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We have about a minute or two for just maybe one or two quick questions. And I see that there's a number of questions that have already been entered into the chat box. So let me just go ahead and start from those right away. I think the first question is, how does this compare to how the market responded to, and I assume, Professor Carnozzi, you're referring to the Waymo deployment in Chandler. So the deployment in Chandler, where we actually see, how people change their behavior. Can you comment on that at all? Do you have any idea of how your survey results compare to sort of what's been seen in some preliminary actual deployments of these things?
So this is a question in the chat box, right?
Yeah.
Let me just check about it so I maybe have a better understanding here. So it's basically about like the people's response to CEVs, right?
Yeah, exactly. How do your sort of survey results, I think, compare to results from people who have actually been able to interact with CAVs in Arizona, where Waymo at least has been testing them?
Yeah, like for our survey design, actually, like we just give some like a brief introduction, some like a brief description of what CEV is. Actually, like we don't have the tool to like people to actually interact with a real vehicle. So we just describe like considering some Waymo vehicles or like consider the Uber vehicles, but it's just like automated driving. There's no drivers in the vehicle. So we will give some like this description before our survey questions to make sure like our respondents have a like basic understanding of our scenarios, and then ask the question following like whether or not you would like to use CV and how would you change your how do you change your travel behaviors.
Yeah, I'm not certain if that specifically addresses the question. I think there might be a misunderstanding, but in the interest of time, I suggest that we take the conversation offline and let our next speaker present so that we can stay on schedule. Thank you very much for all of the questions, and thank you for the presentation. Our next speaker, Qinhua Jiang, deserves extra applause at the introduction, because in addition to presenting, he's also helping manage the tech side on the back end. So he's been frantically making sure that everything works seamlessly here. Qinhua is a PhD candidate in civil environmental engineering at UCLA. His research specialty is in the area of activity-based large-scale intelligent transportation systems and integrated studies with advanced vehicle technologies, such as connected automated vehicles, as well as an interest in vehicle electrification. So Qinhua, go ahead, and the floor is yours. You have about 15 minutes for this talk. And then if I understand correctly, you're also going to be presenting the next talk. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, Dr. Stern,
So I'll introduce you once. We'll have a break for questions in the middle, and then we'll go into the next talk. I don't know if it's intentional. I don't see you right now. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not. Now I see you.
Hi.
There we go. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start my presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Qinhua Jiang. I'm a PhD candidate in Civil Environmental Engineering Department from UCLA. So in today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the connected automated vehicle impacts in Southern California, with a focus on the VMT emissions and equity side. This is actually the part 2 of our CAV impact study. And so the first part of the study focused on the state preference survey data to collect people's preference on travel activities after introducing the CAVs, and also develop the activity-based travel demand model. So based on the results from the part 1 study, this study will do some integrated research with the supply side, and also investigate some system level impacts. So I would just skip all the background information and the activity-based model part and just directly jump into the second half of the study. So after the first part of the study, we already have the scheduled activities of each individual based on the activity-based model. And this is incorporated with the CAV consideration in the whole model. So for the next step, what we want to do is we want to assign the model to the transportation network of the SCAC region and see how the system reacts to the CAVs. And for this, this is the road network for our study region. The SCAC region is actually consists of 6 counties in Southern California. And before the assignment, we incorporate the road capacity adjustment study conducted by RBC so that we improved the link capacity of the specific links in our network to reflect the enhancement of capacity of CAV. So the whole assignment process is carried out in 3 steps. And in the very first step, we generate the OD trip tables from the ABM model, the activity-based travel demand model. And then we use the initial travel time was derived from the encoded speed in the highway network. And we, in the first iteration, we assigned these trips into the network. So we can get the first set of traffic volumes and congested speeds. Then we use this as an input to the second loop, so that the travel demand model in the second loop can use this as input and generate new OD trips. And after that, we assign the new OD trip tables to the network so that we can get the new congestion speeds. So after all the iterations, when we reach the final loop, we can finish the assignment of all classes of vehicles for all different time periods. So we define 5 different time periods in this model, which are AM peak, midday, PM peak, evening, and the nighttime. So this is some of the system level results after we finish the assignment process. The impact are increased. We can see the impact are increased VMT, VHT, and as well as the emission. When we compare the CAV model with the SCAC default model, you can see some very significant increase in these metrics. This basically indicate that people will travel longer distance and longer hours in the network after the CAVs are available. And also we can see the GHG emissions are also increased significantly. And these different indicators are also adopted by the California Air Resource Boards to represent the greenhouse gas emission. So on top of that, we also did some traffic speed analysis on the network using the results from the assignment. So on the left-hand side are the overview of the LA region network. And for those who are not familiar with the geographic pattern of the Los Angeles region, the area highlighted by this red rectangle is the central LA regions. So we compared the speed performance of the SCAC model with the CAV model. Here we use the ratio of speed to free flow speed to represent the level of congestion. So any links with a ratio lower than 0.5 is highlighted with red. To focus on the central LA region, we zoom in and made another 2 plots on the right-hand side, so we can see the detailed comparison between this CAV model and the SCAC original model. You can see that many of the major freeways in the LA region, there is very significant reduction on the congestion links. And the same results also shown in the PM period. So this basically tells us that the CAV can help reduce the congestion and improve the traffic speed on the whole network level. And so we already know that the increase in the mobility and accessibility is what the CAV can brought us to the whole transportation system. But on the other hand, the increase in the VMT, VHT kind of bring the challenge the whole system. So we designed some traffic management or travel demand management strategies to trying to kind of eliminate the these negative impacts on the transportation system. So a lot of the local agencies and state agencies use travel demand management strategies to kind of manage the system level impact. And these lists are some of the strategies adopted by the SCAC. They're either already being used in the real world or listed as the recommended strategy. So based on these strategies, we kind of further analysis for specific scenarios to see what's the influence these travel demand management strategies can have on the system. So the first strategy is the parking pricing strategy. Basically, use differentiated parking price for different type of travel modes. For example, we charge more for the single occupancy vehicle and charge less for high occupancy vehicles. And for the scenario 2, which is transit fare subsidy scenario, here we provide free transit for all the users to see if this is attractive enough for the all the users to shift their mode from the current modes to the public transit mode. And for scenario 3, in this scenario, we basically encourage the teleworking or work remotely for all the workers and see the impact on the reduction of the total VMT. And in the very last scenario, this is a strategy dedicated for all the CAV users, because in this scenario, we assume that we encourage all the CAV users to trade in their existing conventional vehicles when they're trying to purchase the automated vehicles. And as we can see, after we apply these strategies to the existing model, the VMT has very significant decrease, as well as the VHT, when we compare with the CAV-based model, where there's no travel demand management strategy implemented. So basically, this means that these strategies are effective in reducing the VMT, VHT, and also the number of trips or trip frequency. So besides the system level analysis, we also would like to explore the equity performance of these different scenarios, and also the CAV-based scenarios, and compare it with the SCAC-based model to see what's the impact it would be in terms of the equities. So we adopted 3 metrics to represent the equity influence, which are number of trips per household, average trip length, and household travel accessibility. We also separate the whole population into 3 groups by income, which are low income group, middle income group, and upper income group. And for the household travel accessibility, this metric is calculated as a log sum of the utilities across all travel modes for each tour, and we average it across all tours generated from a specific household. And for a group of household falls in each of these income groups, we use the median accessibility value to represent the household level accessibility. And to better compare the equity performance across different scenarios, we also introduce equity index to as an indicator. So here the LMU refer to the value of equity measurements from each of these 3 matrices of lower, middle, and upper income households. And LO, MO, and UO are the equity measurements of the lower, middle, and upper income household in the SCAC-based model. So in general, this index indicate if the equity index is closer to 0, that means a better equity performance. And if it's close to 1, it means the equity performance is similar to the SCAC-based model. In terms of number of trips and average trip length, we can take a look at this table. It shows the equity performance across different scenarios. And also we divide the results into different activity purpose groups. which are mandatory activities and non-mandatory activities. Basically, these mandatory activities are like work or school activities. Well, these activities, non-mandatory activities, are the less priority activities like shopping, visiting friends, or voting. So from this table, we can see that the equity performance of CAV scenarios are better than the SCAC-based scenarios in terms when we take a look at the mandatory activities. However, for the non-mandatory activities, the equity performance of CAV scenarios gets worse than the SCAC-based model. This can be explained by the fact that because most of the mandatory activities, there are long distance travels, and so the people from different income group, especially lower income group, can benefit more from the CAV technologies. While for the non-mandatory activities, based on the Part 1 study, because the upper income group has significant more number of non-mandatory activities. So when the CAV technologies are available for the whole population, the benefit for the upper income group gets better, while the benefit for the lower income groups is not as significant as the upper income groups. And in terms of household travel accessibility, equity performance, we can find that all the CAV scenarios have a better equity performance in household travel accessibility, because they're all lower than the SCAC-based model. But there's exception, which is the scenario 1, parking pricing scenario, where the index is higher than that. And the main reason causing this is because the sensitivity to parking price is different across different income groups. For higher income group, they're less sensitive to the parking price, while for the lower income group, they're more sensitive to the change in the parking price. So this strategy, differentiating the parking pricing, will actually bring more benefit to the upper income group in terms of the equity performance. So to conclude this Part 2 study, except on top of the results we get from the Part 1 study, which are the general sense of the potential CAV users in the whole SCAC region, and their activity changes after the CAVs are available. We can also see some system level results after we do the demand supply side integration. So basically, there's a significant increase in the VMT and emission after the CAV deployment, and also we can see some reduced congestion on the road network. And for the equity side, we can expect improvement in the equity on the mandatory activities. However, when we take a look at the non-mandatory activities, the equity performance is not getting better compared with the no CAV model. And last, here's some policy recommendations based on the research results. Basically, the parking price policies, they are more effective to improve the equity performance in terms of trip frequency and the trip distance, but not for the travel accessibility. Well, for the transit side, it seems like transit incentives are not very effective to either change the VMT value or increase the equity, unless the whole transit network are upgraded. And also the encouragement of teleworking and these marketing strategies for CAV, such as the auto trading, can also help to increase the equity performance. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have maybe about 1 minute or so, a little less for questions, but you're going to be the next speaker. So I think one of the questions that came up here was sort of trying to get a sense of you talk a lot about equity, but it's not entirely clear to me where how you're getting this benefit or how you're measuring this benefit in equity. And I think there were some questions related to that. So I'm wondering if it's possible for you to maybe elaborate a little bit on that. And then we'll see if there's time for another question or two, otherwise possibly after the next talk.
Thank you for the question. The equity analysis is rather complicated compared to the travel demand and the VMT or emission analysis in this study. And we actually did some simplification on how we process the results. And so basically we categorize the population into different groups by income, and we try to find the difference in terms of the travel numbers, travel frequencies, and their accessibilities by calculating the lump sum and the utilities. And the general conclusion is that these CAV technologies under different scenarios, they definitely can help to increase the equity for the mandatory activities. But the specific conclusions for each scenario might not be specifically presented in this presentation, but I will reply to the chat box later when I finish this whole presentation, and also share the link of the paper of this study.
Great, yeah, and I think Dr. He is also responding to things as needed. So there's an active conversation going on, which is great. Let's go ahead in the interest of time and keep going. You're the next speaker. So again, Qinhua Jiang is a PhD student at UCLA, and he's going to be our next speaker as well. So go ahead and share the next presentation. You got over 20 minutes.
Yeah. I will share my screen again for the second presentation. Let me know if you can see the screen now.
Yes, we can see the screen. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So for the second presentation, I will talk about a previous study I did on the highway capacity manual capacity adjustments for the connected automated traffic on roundabouts. This is also a part of a series of study to explore the influence of CAV on the network roadwork capacity for different highway configurations, and this one focus on the roundabouts. So to begin with, I believe you are very familiar with the concept of connected automated vehicles. It's been rapidly developed over the years, and also as transportation researchers, I believe you are also very familiar with the highway capacity manual. It basically contains concepts, guidelines, and computation procedure for computing the capacity and quality of service of various highway facilities, including a lot of intersections, such as the roundabouts. First, I want to introduce the model developed by HCM on how they estimate the entry lane capacity of a roundabout. So basically, they collect a lot of real-world data, and they they come up with this regression model to show the relationship between the capacity and the conflict flow rates. So basically, the conflict flow rate is the flow that in the movement that conflicts with the movement that you want to estimate the capacity of. And they develop different empirical equations for different type of roundabouts and different entry lengths in a roundabout if that's a multi-lane roundabout. So based on this empirical equation, HCM also did some simplification on the equation to make it has some physical meaning. So in this adjusted equation, the capacity is the function of not only the conflict flow rate, but also the follow-up headway and the critical headway. So basically, the critical headway is the smallest gap that the driver is willing to accept merge with the circulating traffic, and then it determines the gap acceptance behavior of the driver. And the follow-up headway is the time between the departure of the first vehicle from the roundabout entry and the departure of the next vehicle. And it basically determines the car following behavior of the traffic on the entry lane. So a very big limitation of the model developed by the HCM is that the whole model is developed based on the conventional vehicle traffic environment. So it'll be very interesting to see how the capacity will change when the traffic is mixed with certain share of CAVs. And the second point is whether this empirical equation will still be valid under different market penetration of CAVs. So in this study, we conducted the microscopic simulation in Basin, and we developed two base models. One is the single lane roundabout, and the second is the double lane roundabout. And for the double lane roundabout, we did different modeling for the right turn lane and the through lane for the entry lanes. And to begin this the modeling, very first step is we calibrated the gap acceptance behavior in Basin by adjusting the gap acceptance parameters settings in Basin to make sure that the capacity curves of different roundabout configuration is well fitted with the results, capacity results calculated by the HCM empirical equation. And this is the capacity curve after the calibration. And these are the two core parameters to be calibrated in the Basin. Okay, and this is the final calibrated results of the Basin gap acceptance parameters for different roundabout configurations we're gonna focus on for this study. So that gap acceptance behavior is calibrated for all the vehicles in the traffic, including the conventional vehicles and the CAVs. But on top of these behavior for CAVs, we also adopted some more advanced car following behavior. And first of all is the cooperative adaptive cruise control model developed by the California PASS program. We use this to basically control the car following behavior of the CAV traffic for the entry lane. And the CACC model it's not only have to control the vehicle's cruise control system, but to maintain a proper following distance behind another car by slowing down as it gets too close. But also it allows the cars to cooperate and communicate with each other while they're in a platoon. The result is that the car follow more closely, accurately, and safely with braking and accelerating down cooperatively. And on top of that, we also develop a modified gap acceptance behavior for all the CAVs. And it basically dynamically changed the status of either leader or follower for all the CAVs in a platoon. So that when the gap created by the conflicting flow is large enough for multiple vehicles to merge into the roundabout, it can make sure that all the CAVs can merge into the roundabout in a platoon, which is a major advantage of CAV against the conventional vehicles. In terms of the simulation, we set up different CAV market penetration rate or MPR, ranging from 0% to 100% at 20% increments, so that we can test the impact of different market share of CAV on the capacity. And we collect three different type of data. The very first data we collect after each scenario is the capacity. We use the total count of traffic flow for the specific lane as the hourly capacity for that lane. In the meantime, we also collect and measured the critical headway and follow-up headway of that specific scenario, so that we can plug in these two parameters into the HCM developed model and calculate a sort of analytical results of the capacity and compare it with the direct count of the capacity. And here's some results of the simulation. So this three different plots shows the capacity curves for different roundabout configurations under different CAV market penetrations. You can see that for all three roundabouts, type of roundabouts, when the CAV market penetration increases for a specific conflict flow rate, the capacity also increase. And this improvement in capacity is more pronounced when the conflict flow rate is lower than when the conflict flow rate is very high. This can be explained by the fact that when the conflict flow rate is lower, it's easier for the roundabout circling flow to generate some large enough gaps for the CAV in the entry lane to merge into the roundabout with a platoon behavior. So when the conflict flow rate is high enough, the gap generated by the conflict flow is not enough to for the CAV, even the CAVs to have some like a platooning behavior to merge. And these are the results for the follow-up headway and critical headway. We measured these two parameters for each roundabout scenarios under different CAV market penetration. We can see that the critical headway results are pretty much not changed for each roundabout when compared with the HCM parameters, and also across different CAV penetrations. While for the follow-up headway, as the CAV penetration increases, the follow-up headway has a clear descending trend, which also indicate that the CAV crime behavior we implemented in this in the CAVs in this model, they mainly just increase the car following behavior when the vehicles are merging into the roundabout, but not to change the gap acceptance judgment of this vehicle. And at last, we also compared the capacity estimation results generated by the Bayesian simulation and the HCM empirical model under 0% CAV condition and 100% CAV market penetration. We can find that when the CAV market penetration rate is 0, the two model has a very good fit. This is as expected because we have calibrated the base model. However, when the CAV market penetration gets higher, the two model, the capacity estimated by the two models is not well fitted. This indicates that when the traffic involves certain, when the percentage of the CAVs increases in this traffic, the HCM model is not cannot appropriately estimate the capacity of that entry lane. So after compare the capacity values of each CAV market penetration with the base case or the 0% CAV market penetration case for different roundabout configurations, we can we develop this table to show the improvement enhancement factors that need to be applied to the base case when we have determined the CV market penetration rates. And this will be an easy way to do a quick estimate of the capacity of a certain type of roundabout if we know the CAV market share and the conflict flow rate. So the conclusion of this study is that first, while with the increase of CAV market penetration, the land capacity of both the single and double lane roundabouts are well improved. And this improves more significant under the low conflict flow rate. And the benefits of CAV to this entering traffic mainly comes from the car following behavior, the platooning behavior when they merge into the roundabout. It's actually not trying to change the gap acceptance behavior of these vehicles. And also the impact of CAVs on roundabout entry lane, they're different across the roundabout configurations. And the improvement is more pronounced in the single lane roundabout and not that significant for the multiple lane roundabouts. And for the single lane roundabout, the capacity increase is significant even when the conflict flow is high. While in the contrast, the capacity improvement in both entry lanes of the double lane roundabout, it's not that significant when the conflict flow rate is high. And that's all for my presentation. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you for presenting two back-to-back presentations. We have a couple of minutes here for questions. So if you have questions, please enter them into the chat box. I haven't seen anything come in specific to this yet. I had a question that was related to sort of how this is applicable going forward. And so, I mean, I think the work that you've done is super important, and it sort of gives us a view of how roundabout design might be impacted with the vehicles as we envision they might be today. And so you mentioned like specifically the path model for ACC vehicles, but this is sort of based on what we either know current generation vehicles to look like or behave like, or what we assume vehicles will behave like. But it doesn't really, I guess we still don't know exactly how automated vehicles or AVs will behave. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you would make this like more general towards different future potential vehicle behaviors. Does my question make sense?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point to make, because there's many randomness and stochasticity in estimating or predicting how the CAV will actually how the behavior of CAV will actually be in the future. So basically here we just adopted a widely implemented CAV car following behavior to the CAVs in this model. And regarding the capacity adjustment, it's also a very specified process, because it had to consider different type of configuration, and also sometimes the size of this intersection or the roundabout is also a important factor. So according to the HCM also, they developed separate models for this different type of combination of the intersection configuration and also the traffic combination. So I would say it would be very challenging to trying to generate a more generic model for this different type of intersections. But a study like this can basically give us like a general sense of how the improvement of like capacity would be in the future. And but yeah, more further studies needed if we want to like incorporate all different types of this road configuration in one more generic model.
Yeah, and I'm thinking beyond just different road configurations, but different potential future behaviors of automated vehicles. So you can imagine a scenario where AVs are super aggressive, And you can imagine a scenario where AVs are super passive. And both of those are going to have different impacts. And so if we do the study with one assumption, well, we have results that are applicable for vehicles that behave like we assumed they might behave. And so I'm wondering if you could maybe one thing that you could do is parameterize the AV's driving behavior on aggressivity and say, we have aggressivity values that range from 0 to 10, whatever that means, I don't know. And then we have like different curves or some sort of factor in there that then changes the factor value for different aggressivity levels. I'm wondering if something like that could be done. I'm trying to get at basically, we don't know how AVs will behave. We know how current generation ACC vehicles behave, and we know how Waymo cars behave. And that's about it, right? And so I'm trying to figure out how we can get results that are forward applicable to different potential AV driving behaviors.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Especially the part you mentioned, the aggressive, the level of aggressive in the gap acceptance judgment is also totally different when we use different assumptions. And I mean, we need more data on this type of aspect of the study. But currently, because this specific study is highly based on the HCM model and makes some improvement on that model. So yeah, these aspects are kind of ignored from the research scope of the study. But yeah, I believe if we want to get a more accurate and precise prediction for the capacity for intersections, and those are something that must be involved in the study.
Yeah, I'm not expecting a concrete answer. I know that's beyond the study. I'm just sort of food for thought on where to go from here. Thanks a lot, Qinhua. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put you back in the role as tech guru for the session. It looks like our next speaker, Homan Ganjipur, had a medical emergency and was not able to join us. And so we're going to be playing his video. Can you go ahead and play that? And then I'm going to give the email address. So if you have questions, don't put them in chat necessarily, because I don't think anyone here is going to be able to answer them. But if you have any questions, I'm going to put his email address in chat, and then you can just send him an email directly. So Homan Ganjipur is a research assistant PhD candidate at the KN2C University of Technology. His research interests include things like e-shopping, delivery drones, and the use of delivery droids. And his doctoral research is supervised by Professor Ali Edrisi. Qinhua, do you have the video for Homan?
I'm sorry, but I just checked the share box of the BRT. It seems like this author didn't upload his video recording of the presentation.
Only the slides?
In the slides, yes.
Okay. So in that case, I think we're going to have to end the session a little early. But unless Homan is here, but I think he had to leave. So I want to thank everyone for attending today. This has been really great. We've had some really active discussions. We've had some really great presentations and a lot of good questions. So I really appreciate everyone's time in attending today. Thank you very much and have a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you.